All right, Gene, I think we are now live. Thank you so much for doing this. I just blogged the fact that output to outcome is available. I literally hit send on that blog was 15 minutes ago. So I'm definitely quite excited to be at this step of the journey.
Totally. Congratulations, buddy. As they say, about writing books, many start, few finish.
That's right. I really appreciate doing this. You've been such an inspiration to me and the rest of the community, and your ideas you're writing and bringing this all together. So I could not be happier that you're going to be here and either grilling me or asking me questions or just helping me celebrate with it.
Oh, no, absolutely. In fact, I loved reading the book, and just like your first book, Project to Product, Output to Outcome was just as riveting and uh, mind blowing, because it really sort of challenged expectations and made me see something in a way that I didn't see before. So I actually have a bunch of questions I want to ask you that would be useful to for not just me, but everyone on this live stream. So whenever you're ready, happy
ready.
to.
I'm not doing anything else right now.
So good. So I guess why write this book?
Yes, I think Project to Product was interesting, right? Because I saw that and I think as you studied and researched for so long and wrote about for so long, and I think it's inspired leaders around making changes around the fact that elite organizations were getting better and better and better at building software. This is kind of looking back the last decade or two, whereas others were just kind of stagnating. And I realized a lot of that had to do with how these organizations connected business and technology, and really had a lot to do with how they were funding or not funding innovation, thinking of technology as a cost center, not a profit center. And that really catalyzed the ideas behind Project to Product. And I think a lot of those ideas are valid because and continue to be relevant because we're seeing that organizations who set up value streams in a product operating model adopt AI more easily and get outcomes more quickly. But I also realized that there's been just everything. There's been upheaval across the board, right? Because the main
what
thing that
happened was causing all this upheaval, Mik?
There's all this upheaval. I think operating models of kind of the past were really focused on the main constraint, scarcity being developer productivity and knowledge worker productivity. And with AI, all of that has changed. So all of a sudden, all of those management systems and reporting and ceremonies that had to do with managing what was the most scarce constraint are no longer valid. Right? We're now able to scale coding through AI, through agents. Teams can do 2, 3, 5, 10 times more output than they were able to produce before. And the management systems that don't adapt will no longer, I think, be valid or sensible in this age of AI. So that was really the motivation. I started wanting to kind of do a follow-on to Project to Product, but I'd spent 2.5 years building out agentic frameworks and working with agents and seeing really what was going on, especially in those early days of kind of 2022, 2023, and going into 2024. And then I think for a lot of us, the writing was on the wall that this is now going to scale outputs to levels that are unimaginable. And what does that mean to our organization?
All right. So you got your PhD in software engineering and architectures. You've written over 1 million lines of production code in your career. Like my friend Steve Yegi. And there's a claim that you make in the book, that basically, coding is no longer the constraint. That for this is my words, not yours, but for medium and long-term planning purposes, basically assume that the cost of software production is going to zero. It's instantaneous and it's free. So like, one, do you believe that? And two, can you help maybe skeptical people like really understand what the implications of that are?
Right. Yeah. So I think as you just pointed out, I spent most of my career building outputs, right? So writing code and making it easier to write code and making it easier to collaborate with other people writing code. And yeah, I think what we're now seeing is that the ability, and it's not just coding, of course, coding was just an kind of easy place for AI to start because it's so linguistic. And large language models were kind of, reasonably good at it from the get-go. But we're now at the point where it's, for individual developers with hands on keyboards can get 10, I think we're kind of at the precipice of 100 times more work done by getting AI to do the actual coding and knowledge production rather than doing it themselves, right? So I think we're here today. I think maybe there's still some skepticism on it, but I think all of that will disappear fairly quickly because the evidence is there, right? We're seeing AI native organizations who have those those levels of output, right? We're going to start seeing the what happens when we get recursive self improvement, and I think it's just time to accept the fact that it's no longer about knowledge production. It's about what we do with that and really the outcomes that that drives. Because I think, as you just said, Gene, outputs will become free. They will over time. I'm not saying tokens are free today. I think a lot of people are dealing with token subsidies disappearing over the next little while. But I think what we're seeing is, of course, these models becoming more capable. As they become more capable, even what you'll be able to do with cheaper models
Yeah.
is going to become, orders of magnitude more than you could ever do with as a single person or a team. So really, what I think that means, and this is really the core thesis of output to outcome, right? If coding is no longer that constraint, if the cost of producing knowledge work outputs trends to the cost of electricity, what does that mean for organizations? Because I think what we've seen in every technological revolution is that there's some constraint on productivity, on delivering results to customers and to the business and to the market. And output to outcome kind of digs in, inspired by a lot of the ideas that you and Steve Spear had in Wiring the Winning Organization, and says, okay, well, if the organization is no longer the team producing output, it's actually the organization itself.
Yeah, no, it's super interesting. By the way, before we go into the methods, I mean, there's the part that one of the parts I loved about your book was just talking about AI as a slot machine, not a slot machine, but a generator of slop, which I just
Yeah.
I loved, right? And you had some amazing insights and observations about the role of leadership and the role of human judgment, to counter the risk of AI generating lots of slop and output.
Right. Yeah. So I think if we look at the, let's take the organization's management system that's really meant around a kind of a team level productivity, right? If all of a sudden, and it's already, I think we know from work that was, the whole agile and DevOps movement and product movement, we know that it took significant work to align business and technology and customers, right? So let's just say that, I don't know, half the work that team was doing. Now, of course, the data in output outcomes shows it's actually much less than half the work was driving meaningful outputs. It's usually less than a third of the work. But let's just say the half the work the team is doing is meaningful. Now, all of a sudden, you have the ability to do 30 times the work, right? What percentage of that 30 times is going to be substance and not slop? So there's this chapter, Slop to Substance, which really talks about that. How do you know that what you're producing is actually driving that value? Because now that you're able to produce that at 2, 5, 10 times the rate, you could actually be, if it's not aligned to your strategy, to customer outcomes, and it's not measured, so you actually don't know whether it's driving those outcomes or not, you're actually, you could be doing more harm than good in the process.
Yeah. In fact, one of the lines that you had in your book, it was like, the ability for AI to generate, say, books or music, like so far outstrips our ability to listen to it now, right? It just
That's
shows
right.
that
Yeah.
how important
Yeah.
judicious we need to be in terms of what we create.
Yeah, that's right. And I think I was relating it back to kind of the Shakespeare and monkeys typing on typewriters, right? For any given customer, any given market, how many, could we, I'm sure we could benefit from having, 2x the Shakespearean plays, but having 100,000 more Shakespearean plays, can we really consume that, right?
Right.
And of course, we're actually now seeing that on Spotify.
Yeah.
Of AI music uploads. So,
No,
not
it's
to
so
mention all sorts of
interesting.
feeds wherever we follow our feeds.
And I love that, and I think it was just a great way of sort of portraying kind of like what does it really mean to create meaningful output, right, in a realm that has nothing to do with software. And so your next section was about chaos to cadence, which I thought was just amazing. So can you talk us through what you were trying to convey in the lessons in that section?
Yeah. So this has been an observation that's understood better and better just over the years, which is that there's been this, I think, challenge with just digital transformations, with the way that developer productivity, DevX experiences were rolled out, the way Agile was rolled out, which is that organizations have a hard time transforming at their core, right? Because the core has to do with power structures and leadership structures and incentive structures and all those things that are less easy to touch than throwing some tools and technology at teams. So I think what we've seen, if you kind of unpack large enterprises today, what you'll see is that there's a core organizational structure and wiring. And then you've actually got all these layers on top of that, right? So agile was changed as a layer, and all of a sudden you had new roles, right? You had scrum masters, and you had these overlays and really these matrix lines over the organization. And then, of course, that happened with kind of the way DevOps and automation came in. Now it's happening again with AI. And so what's happening is we're getting these layers and layers of organizational structures getting piled on. And I think, Gene, kind of this is kind of referring back to you and Steve, I think that's measured in the insane coordination costs that companies have, because no longer can just traverse up the organizational chart to get permission on something. If you've got agile ceremonies deployed, you might have to go and navigate these dependencies line. You might have to go to a technical program manager, a TPM, and these sorts of things. And it's actually really one of the easiest places to identify this is in the kind of meeting cadences and ceremonies and reporting lines that organizations have, right? So we know that AI should just blow away the need for manual reporting and really the way that these ceremonies run. But the challenge that these organizations have is they have all these separate processes around that. They still have the PI planning. They have the quarterly business reviews, right? They have performance reviews and other things having to do with the HR org chart. And so I think a very easy place to kind of inspect your organization and start this transformation to a more AI native operating model is to look at kind of that chaotic set of meetings and cadences, and to look at what a singular cadence would look like. Right? The business should run on just a single cadence. Your PI planning, your QBRs, your organizational planning, your funding, your investments, that should just be one cadence that kind of moves at the speed of AI and agents. And so that's that idea of chaos to cadence, is moving away from those lines.
So we're working on a different paper, you, me, and Joe Butler from OpenAI, and a whole bunch of other people we admire. And we were working on this. I was reminded of your book when he said, the CIO of a large bank, she said, we're going to go from products being delivered in 100 days to 1 day. And so what does that mean for like when someone goes on vacation for 3 days? Can you really afford to wait 3 days? That's essentially 3 cycles of delivery that you are now basically zeroed out as ability. I mean, it just shows that the opportunity cost of delay is just off the charts. We've never seen anything like it before. What was run some kind of a rounding error? If something was delayed for 3 days, that was okay. It's like one of 100 things delayed by 3 days. Now delays are the only thing that sets the tempo of how much you can deliver.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that hits at the core of this. And so that has to do both with kind of wait states and delays that way, but it also fundamentally affects how you think about planning, right? Like in a world where you can deliver something daily, what does it mean to plan quarterly, right? And I actually think you still have to plan quarterly, which I'll get to in a second. But the dynamics change completely. Once again, you can produce that level of output. And so at the core of outcome is this concept of an outcome loop, right? And that's kind of very simple feedback loop where you've got inputs, your strategy, your budget. You've got outputs. Those are all the things that humans and agents build, so all the artifacts and activities that produce work. And then you've got outcomes. And those are customer outcomes, employee outcomes, because output makes employee and staff outcomes a central piece. I think those are critical, and we can dig into that. And together, those business and customer outcomes customer and employee outcomes produce business outcomes. And so, given that for many organizations, outputs are no longer the constraint, right? That's actually happening fairly quickly, where you can produce value daily and produce really, what would take months to do a mobile app, you can do 5 of those in 2 weeks, right? And test them separately. If outputs stop being the constraints, it really is all about applying the theory of constraints to your outcome loop, right? Yeah. Because maybe the constraint's that person who's gone on vacation for 3 days. Or maybe the constraint is that you have to, now that you've kind of finished this work quickly, you have to get the salespeople or the marketing engine behind that work and get rid of those wait states. So that's really the core thesis of the whole book is we have to apply the theory of constraints to the whole outcome loop. And maybe there's still some output constraints, right? Maybe teams have not been provided, or they max their tokens, right? They've hit their budgets. Now that's their constraint. So it's all about applying that theory of constraints to the outcome loop so that we can continue that acceleration to move at the kind of speed and amplification provided by AI.
Yeah, in fact, in one of later in the book, you actually described, I mean, for me, it was just one of the shocking things, like so many of your books do. You were talking to our mutual friend, Swix, who runs the AI Engineer Summit and so forth. He's now at Cognition. And he had something startling to say about like what what you can do when software creation costs go to zero in terms of like optionality. Do you want to share that shocking story?
Yeah, and I think it's a shocking and an amazing and beautiful story, right? Because uh, for the context that a lot of people think of planning is really, this sequential thing, right? We'll get this thing done, and then we'll get feedback, and then we'll do the next thing. But in a world where your outputs are really unconstrained, you can actually produce more than, you've got kind of an abundance of what you can produce. So Cognition do this amazing thing of, producing different agents over the course of a week and discarding the majority of them when they come to their review cycle, which happens to be a Sunday meeting with a CEO. So they're basically discarding more than they're keeping, and that's just completely backwards for most managerial systems, which is why that case study is so early in the book, because so many of the managerial systems that we have to do with prioritization, right?
Yeah.
Like the production of value of features, applications, capabilities, services, and the rest is the constraint. So you're spending all this organizational energy on kind of planning with a sequence of those things. But as soon as you actually have more capacity to produce, you can do something amazing, which is not just do, because in the end, these outcomes are hypothesis testing, right? Will this kind of drive customer satisfaction, revenue growth, all those sorts of things? And as soon as you've got that, agents driving an abundance of production, you can actually do hypothesis testing in parallel. You can deploy 10 different things and keep one of them.
Yeah.
And I think that's this really fundamental change, right? I think that's one fundamental change that goes throughout the book. The other one is around autonomous value streams, which has to do a lot with kind of, the loops, agentic loops that people are talking about now. But really, how do we harness those to deliver value and substance and not slop?
And by the way, I mean, this is shocking, right? It's like you would never hear about a car company who makes 10 times as many cars that they need to, keep one and throw the rest away. It's just,
But
it's just not done.
That's right. Yeah, and it's that fundamental a change.
Yeah. Amazing. Okay, so we're talking a lot about sort of like the output and the planning loop, but then there's you talk about the as a way that only you can do is talking about like the organizational. How do you rewire the organization to actually be able to turn the crank better to steer towards outcomes that actually matter, and then that's what the setup for matrix modularity. Tell us about that.
Yeah, and the matrix modularity, I guess that's kind of like some of the core of the book, and it does have to do with something that I know you and I have spent a lot of time thinking through, but it has to do with architecture and organizational architecture, and really this concept of modularity. And the reason modularity is brought in. So first of all, we these outcome loops, like one outcome loop's not enough, right? Maybe it's possible that you're I don't know, a founder, like a single person driving $1 billion business with just agents, but I think that's going to be the exception, and I think it's going to be kind of lonely as well. So I think we want to be able to scale these outcome loops, where every outcome loop should have a team behind it and somehow create an organizational structure that supports this kind of velocity. And to I think to really understand how we can create that, because in the end, it's a scaling structure. To create that scaling structure, it really, I leaned a lot on the ideas of our mutual friend, Adrian Cockcroft, who, worked a lot on scaling structures at Netflix and at Amazon. And this really, in the end, is kind of inspired back to how scaling structures work in nature, which is this hierarchical, self-similar decentralization, right? You can't have a scaling structure where, and of course, I think the entire enterprise DevOps movement made the case for this over many years. I think this is just now being amplified with AI. But if you're on a team and you have to go keep asking someone for permission to do something, you lack that the concept directly from wiring the winning organization, the independence of action. You can't actually scale outcome delivery because you're waiting. So the only structure that can really work has to be one that kind of drives empowerment and ownership at the team level and somehow creates this cascade. And that structure and outcome is the outcome tree. So you've got full autonomy of outputs. How you build and deliver outputs is up to the team. And then, of course, that you need inputs, right? You need kind of the budgets, the organizational vision and strategy. You need to be able to kind of invest in both hiring people and tokens, and spending on tokens, and then driving outcomes, and those outcomes cascade up. And so the metaphor really is this metaphor of a tree, right? Where the organizational structures, all the trunk and the branches, really supporting those teams. But all that really matters is getting the nutrients to those teams and getting the outcomes from those teams to the market. And so it's this tree structure. And the idea is that you go away from all these matrix structures that are causing all these insane coordination costs, and you create a single organizational structure. So the org chart, the value stream structure, how you deliver value, the product and platform hierarchy, and the technological structure. So really the architecture are just a single, simple hierarchical structure with, of course, dependencies linking things and so on. Even trees can do signaling across all of its branches and leaves. But yeah, where you actually have this single structure, and that at the core of that structure is modularity.
Yeah.
So you've got cohesion, where those leaves, the teams, have independent work they can do, and you've got low coupling, where they don't need to ask 4 different teams or leaders for permission to do anything. They can move independently. So that's really at the core of creating this structure that can scale to supporting very large fleets of agents doing work in support of a team's objectives. Is this modular value stream structure?
Yeah, and so recently I was doing a kind of a thought exercise of like, all right, if every software delivery team, service delivery team, is able to deliver capabilities to move the needle on outcomes that matter, what do you do when you still need information security reviews, which might take like a week, or like legal review, which might take a month? I mean, those are scarce resources. What does it mean? I mean, can you make some predictions and can you give some tips on like, all right, you got to ship things that are in compliance with laws and regulations and are secure, that protects application data. What now?
Right. Yeah. And so this is where we get back to the theory of constraints. So you've got each kind of team, each leaf. And by the way, Steve Thomas is just putting a comment. Cohesion coupling is Back to the Future. Absolutely, that's the idea. I think these things worked for us working on the very large systems, right? Whether those systems are software or they're factories, cohesion and coupling, I think, are fundamental to kind of managing that is fundamental to complex systems functioning effectively, whether we're talking about nature or software. But so I think, Gene, as you're pointing out, like for organizations, what you'll actually have is constraints, right? Whether that constraint is legal or compliance or governance of that or that sort of thing. And so that idea that like a core part of the planning loop, and a core, I think, for many adopting AI at an appropriately fast pace, the constraint will actually have to do with those kinds of things, with planning and with these slower cadences that organizations are built around. And so the way that we need to address that is, again, is applying the theory of constraints and bringing that back into into refining the outcome loop, which I think, by the way, becomes one of the #1 jobs of a leader at every level of the organization. So the mechanism, and Output.M has all these mechanisms, because the idea was to make these concepts concrete. The mechanism is called an improvement objective. So basically, as soon as you see a constraint in your outcome loop, let's say that security or like some SOC compliance check is too slow, you identify that as a constraint. And then that constraint goes somewhere, either onto your team's backlog, which you're going to resolve quickly, or somewhere up. Every time it goes up the tree, of course, it's more expensive and slower to get resolved, but it keeps going up. And then it makes it onto the outcome roadmap for that particular team. So when kind of SOC compliance was the constraint for my teams, what we did is implemented continuous compliance. Right? It's a whole bunch of work where you can actually do continuous compliance, but you can do it in a SOC compatible way, or whatever you're compliant. You might be a financial institution with money laundering compliance, or a healthcare institution with other kinds of compliance. But I think those things that can be automated with AI then get automated. The question is just where. Which node in the outcome tree does this? And of course, if you've got some fundamental constraints, like I know some review board only meets quarterly, you just then have to manage around that constraint.
Yeah. And in fact, I mean, just two things to riff with you. I mean, as the we were nerding out some years ago about like the Nyquist-Shannon's sampling theorem, and there's actually another side effect, but basically the control loop must operate as at least as fast as the the process that it is controlling. And so as the output loop speeds up by 100x, the control systems also have to increase in speed by 100x, and it just the amount of communication and coordination that has to happen also go up, proportionally, and sort of it's a mismatch between those weekly review boards and the 2-week planning sessions are now way out of sync with the actual value creation machine. Does that resonate with you?
Yeah, I think that's just a great summary of a whole bunch of the book.
Yeah.
And then what I'm hoping is that some of the mechanisms, right, is that you have to dedicate an appropriate portion of your capacity at each level in the tree to resolving those constraints to make the control mechanism, A, to make the control mechanism run faster, and B, to look at places that introduce the wait states and the friction to remove them.
Yeah.
So
and here's kind of a crazy thought that I had. I was just literally was actually going to text you. It's like kind of doing this thought exercise. Does this mean that things like information security, legal, like where it becomes intolerable to wait? Is that like a good place to like have kids, people entering the job force focus on? Because the need for information security can go up, not down. I mean, or are there better ways that you think that the LLMs and that expertise can be actually brought, bring the needed expertise, and we don't need more people?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting thought experiment, right? Because I think, I think a lot of us hope that, we're going to make Jeff Vaughn's paradox come true, right? That somehow with all of the efforts everyone's undergoing and helping organizations adopt AI, it's going to create new kinds of jobs. And I think where we can look for that job creation is the constraints in the organization.
Yeah.
Right. So coding's not the constraint. So my old job is changed. But that amplification creates all these additional constraints, right? So now, of course, information security is going to be one of them. Now, the challenge is that we have to be thoughtful about it, right? Because Mythos apparently is fairly good at doing InfoSec stuff. So it might not be people who manage 10 different InfoSec vendors. It might be people who create and automate a whole new level and speed of information security checking for the organizations and remedies, right? Because you need the remedies. But I think that's a great way to look at it, right? As whether you're looking for kind of where to orient your career, you're coaching other people around their careers, is wherever those constraints are in their organization, that's where there's going to be some interesting job creation.
Boy, what a great point. I remember, for the older people in the audience, right? Like around the .com boom, right? The most, the most no-brainer move was to, send your kids to computer science, right? Because it was so obvious that's where the jobs were going to be, and maybe we're going to be, faced with kind of a shift in, where the obvious places where job creation happens. So we talked about sort of organization of teams, matrix and modularity. Let's talk about objectives to ownership. You talk about the outcome roadmaps and so forth, right? It's like, all right, who owns these roadmaps?
Yeah, and I think this is another, the challenge of all these matrix structures diluted ownership, right? And so when you have take the challenge because of things like objectives and key results, right? I've been very happily leveraging objectives and key results for ever since John Doerr's book came out, right? But there's just as many ways to abuse them and fail with objectives and key results as a planning mechanism, right? So I think where things fail is where we've got diluted ownership, right? And that really is around having a organizational structure, call that your org chart, that's separate from the business value structure, which has to do with how people are, really what's being offered to the market, how things are being funded, and then the incentive structure, right? So let's say you put an objective on a team that's misaligned with the incentive structure of that team's leader. Guess which wins?
Yeah.
So I think
tell us the answer.
The answer is the compensation structure will dominate most other structures you put on top of it in most organizations, right? So I think we need to move away from kind of these simple objectives. We have shared goals for the company, for the team, which obviously are important at a kind of strategy and vision level. But if we're going to empower teams, they need ownership of their own objectives, and that ownership needs to actually be that's part of the same structure, the same wiring as the compensation structure for the organization. It's interesting in that chapter, I actually go into kind of what good looks like in compensation structures that are aligned to these objective cascades and what bad looks like. And then of course, that's an organizational structure that needs to be tied into the actual architecture, right? Because if teams are reliant on a platform component that's moving very slowly, it doesn't matter like what objectives you're going to put on the leader of that team if they're waiting these days 2 weeks, previously 2 months for someone else to get their work done. And so there's this comment here from Edith Hughes that this all sounds like isomorphism in practice, right? And it really is. Like
Great
that's
word.
the idea. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
isomorphism. The word, I believe that word occurs in the book, but it's I do get into it as around socio-technical congruence, right? That we really want kind of the technology architecture, all the kind of reverse Conway's law stuff, and the organizational chart and the objective and compensation structure to be one structure. And that structure to really be all around kind of empowering the leaves to move at the speed they can and taking kind of dependencies and friction out of their way.
Yeah, so good. In fact, I mean, so what triggered that thought exercise about information security and legal is like, okay, if they are genuinely the constraint, kind of the owner of that objective, if they want to hire 100 times more information security engineers and lawyers, well, if they have the budget, and they can justify it, go for it, right? And maybe even invest in like R&D to sort of drive down the human labor component of that. But I mean, I think it's a very empowering thing, right? It's like if you are fully own the objective, then you can make decisions like you think that are best fit to move the needle on your objectives. I think that's a wonderful.
Yeah, exactly. And then you kind of moving at the speed of a startup, like the organization becomes kind of like the managers become more of have this actual true product management, product ownership, CEO of their value stream sort of role.
Yeah.
And if you move against that, as Steve Thomas points out in the chat, it's that quote by John Smart that's both funny and very sad, is that incentives eat everything continuously.
So good. Okay, so now we talk about like the ideal sort of isomorphic between the socio-technical systems and the incentive structures. That leads us to divisions and domains. Tell us about that.
Yeah, and this gets back to how we structure these outcome trees. And part of me wanted to not put this chapter in the book. It was just the same. It was like in the writing, because it gets a little bit detailed, and the book I thought was already had like a lot of mechanisms up to this point. This is like divisions, domains. That's chapter 9, and it's the reason I actually skipped this part of project to product. In project to product, and it was one of the kind of biggest gaps, right? Project to product did not talk enough about platforms, right? So there's actually a product to platform chapter or a section, I should say, in divisions to domains, but this really was around how practically how you scale outcome trees, because organizations have seen way too much of this cookie cutter approach that we're going to do. We're going to take these more agile or AI native ways of working and apply them to everything. And that means, okay, every one of my teams has token budget X, and then let's see what you do with X. And your outcomes are driving company growth or driving driving profitability. And kind of with leveraging AI, and hopefully you can now do more with fewer staff and so on. And if you look at what kind of good looks like in companies innovating very quickly, they've actually looked at their entire portfolio and really segmented it, right? So you've got, and it introduces this outcome domain model, which is mechanisms for segmenting your outcome tree, right? You've got kind of the core products behind your business, which are meant to be producing kind of growth and revenue and contributing to the top line. You've got to make really significant investments in AI and in productivity systems, which really need to help it manage your bottom line, right? That's where if you're going to be deploying some kind of multi-agent, multi-LLM framework, it needs to be there, right? Where you might need to do delegate some of the workloads to cheaper agents or do some caching and those sorts of things. That's not producing revenue on its own. Right? those are the new platform components, and you better invest in those quickly. But if the way that you fund your value stream says, okay, well, everything needs to produce the top line, that's just wrong. Then chances are, because there's going to be so much creative disruption going on right now, you need to incubate some things, right? Yeah. And if you put the same token budgets on teams doing incubation as you do on teams working on kind of the core products, that's another mistake. Those teams should probably be unconstrained. They should be burning 10 times the tokens of every other team, because they need to be experimenting and trying these very new things. And so divisions to domains is really about how you segment your outcome tree to tailor both the input and outcome metrics according to where these things lie. And so it's really kind of meant to be an AI native version of horizon management.
Yeah. No, by the way, just something we were talking about in the when we were all together in April. We were hanging out with Joe Butler, who owns solution engineering for their most strategic customers,
Yeah,
and he was talking about some of the achievements at OpenAI. Um, and the fact that PwC benchmarked them, and they found that the size of their finance department is only 20% of what it should be. Given revenue growth,
yeah,
entity complexity, et cetera.
yeah.
And it's because they invested so heavily. Every C-level officer has an engineering manager, right, with AI expertise, developers, right, and so forth to explore these capacities. And what the output is like, the outcome is unparalleled efficiencies, but it's not about cost cutting. I just heard this. There are there's some who say that who observed that OpenAI did the $100 billion capital raise without the use of any investment bankers, no external consultants. It was all done internally, and so just shows like in almost every domain of work, right? We're pushing the frontiers of what's possible because of like innovation done at unparalleled scale.
That's right. And I mean, but Gene, I know that chapter 9 was like this divisions domain was like the one that you had to trudge through the most. It was, it got very detailed. But this is the tricky thing is that I think this journey, and I think OpenAI and what you just mentioned is a great example of this. You need mechanisms to understand kind of where to put what automation and who's responsible for what, right?
Yeah.
So I think and this is actually all covered in that chapter. So I think let's just say the kind of first step on the journey for many organizations will be, okay, let's make this completely centralized AI team that provides all the agents and so on. And then of course they become the bottleneck. They become a new platform team. It's relevant, it's useful, but they become the bottleneck. What OpenAI, the example that that we heard from Joe, is very different, which is that the finance organization, presumably the marketing and sales organizations, they all have their own AI capabilities. So they're not dependent on a centralized service. And so that chapter is really what you kind of segment and what you centralize and what you decentralize. And I think what we're seeing is from decentralizing AI capabilities makes the whole organization move faster so that finance is not the bottleneck.
Yeah, it's just so amazing to see these predictions come true. As anything so revelatory and exciting about your book. Okay, so that was divisions to domains, and then we end on managers to makers. Tell us about that.
Yeah, that chapter took me like twice as long to write as any other chapter, because it really is around the evolving roles of leaders, individual contributors, and for a long time that chapter was called Makers to Managers, and then it switched to Managers to Makers, and it's both, right? In the end, I think we're now at the point where there's just going to be this blending of roles, right? Where an individual developer, like I used to kind of sit off in the corner on my laptop, very very happily, mind you, just coding, right? And I measured kind of the happiness of my day by how few meetings I had, not how many not how many meetings I had, right? That was really the maker's schedule. It's a Paul Graham. There's maker calendars and manager calendars, or maker schedules, manager schedules. And but today you're able to produce so fast that it makes no sense to just produce without communicating with either customers or internal stakeholders. So the job of the individual contributor, whether they're an engineer or another kind of knowledge worker, it's really shifting to a managerial role, like more of a product management role, right? So those jobs are shifting. At the same rate, let's say if you're going back to your OpenAI finance example, that one from Joe, if you're sitting in finance, you can and you're a leader in finance, you can no longer afford to say, okay, engineers can do everything for me. You actually have to figure out kind of the agents, the systems that you're going to automate with AI. So you've actually become a maker, right? So, and so I think we're going to see this blending of roles of makers and managers. And I think what we can look at is, sort of and this is a little bit similar, I think, Gene, to your technical maestro criteria, where I think the key thing is all leaders need to get their hands on AI, right? Like need to be hands-on with AI now and forevermore. And all individual contributors need to actually just become more communicators and outcome owners. And so this all goes into the fact that everyone needs to be an outcome owner for their portion of the organization. And then that means, of course, optimizing their outcome loop wherever they are, it kind of in the leadership hierarchy. So.
Yeah, in fact, I'm just to riff with you. I mean, one of the people who presented at the Enterprise AI Summit in April, and who's presenting tomorrow at the Monthly AI Forum, is Dustin Warner, Director of Engineering from NRC Health. And it's just, I mean, I love how he exudes things like this. I mean, he said, as a director, right, he leads a team of managers, right? And if, my words, not his, but he's saying if he doesn't see their team size is shrinking, if he doesn't see their token use increasing, and if he doesn't feel like we're getting is the juice worth the squeeze, are they moving the needle on something that matters, right? He's not giving more tokens, right? But for the people who are creating, real value, there's essentially an unlimited token budget, that he will give them. And so that the notion of the leader, right? They're responsible for the socio-technical systems that they are responsible for. I guess that's tautology, but I mean, it's just amazing. Like, you can't do that unless if you're in some ways a maker, right? So it just
That's right.
I think it vividly exemplifies the virtues and the requirements that you're talking about.
That's right, and I think that's really at the core of that last chapter, right? It's just, as a leader, you're responsible for creating that architecture, right? That's an organizational and socio-technical architecture. And that's one of the most important job of leaders to create. Now, William Judd has this interesting comment I just want to touch on. He says, so where to put automation? Or let's turn this on its head. If AI created a software company, what would it hire humans to do? So
I think click on authentication login buttons.
Yeah, right, exactly. And fill forms. So output to outcome has completely turns that on its head, which is to say the outcome tree is a human structure because humans have intentionality, right? We're still, you can kind of, I've actually been reading the latest literature on where we are with AI and consciousness, and that progress is an area that's not moving that quickly. So I think we can assume that for the time being, whatever that is, AI won't have the kind of human incentives and consciousness and wanting the best for their kids and the biggest bonus for a great vacation. But those are human things, right? And so it's really not about what AI is hiring humans to do, but what humans should hire humans and AI to do. And so the outcome tree is this human leadership structure where humans report to humans, but leverage agents at every level as much as can drive outcomes, right? At some point, you're going to also tap out of that, right? That finance team in OpenAI, they probably shouldn't produce 100 management investment decks, but 2 or 3, and figure one and keep one. So I think, and to me, this is a really important aspect of this, that the outcome tree becomes a management, basically a control structure for leveraging the amplification of agents in a way that's aligned to human intentions and goals in the organization.
Oh, so good. Well, I know we're coming up on time, but I have to ask with 2 questions, right? One is, what was the most rewarding part of writing the book, and what was the biggest surprise?
Yeah. The most rewarding part, I guess it really was just kind of getting into the time I was able to take, because I spent, basically was doing very little else, 80-90% of my days at this point, as I was in kind of depth. It was really, I guess, it was basically a 2-year journey, but a 12 month of just writing, or 15 months of just writing. It was just, just going really deep into these concepts and testing them out, and obviously being able to leverage AI to test them out on kind of various data sets and and structures and learnings I'd had. So I think it was just the amount of time I got to spend rewiring my own brain while talking about, helping others rewire organizations. Because I think it's just, as you said, I think that car example of yours at the start, Gene, that's the example, right? We've never dealt with dynamics like this before. So this is going to be the biggest rewiring of management systems that's ever happened. And I'm hoping that some of these mechanisms just help accelerate that rewiring, or help you spot some of the things to look for. And what was the second question?
Biggest surprise.
The biggest surprise. It's going to sound a little weird probably, but the biggest surprise for me is through that journey of exploration and research is that it came back to a tree structure. Right? Because we think of I think we've spent so much time in terms of helping teams thrive and remove burden from the system and wait states, throwing hierarchies under the bus. And I have as well, obviously. But I realized by kind of studying these organizations and having built my own or like built organizations, is that it's not the hierarchy that's the problem. It's what the hierarchy is. If the hierarchy is an empowerment hierarchy, and one around high cohesional coupling, it's a great hierarchy for teams, right? And if there aren't all these other lines where you have to ask for permission for things, it turns out it's a really great hierarchy. So I think the most surprising thing to me is that, and of course, you'll always have dependencies and some kind of matrixing and cross value stream collaboration lines and all those things happening. But the fact I think that the optimal structure for leveraging AI is the self-similar fractal structure that we see in nature, but where the hierarchy lines are all around empowerment, not power and control.
So good. Well, Mik, my heartiest congratulations to you for creating just a magnificent book and a genuine contribution to to kind of the way we work and the way we lead and the way we get value. So really, thanks for the opportunity to be able to ask you questions. I'm wondering if you could just conclude by giving some advice to everyone in the audience, and then the rest take us home.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, and then thank you for all your help along the way and all your inspiration. So no, it's been great. But yeah, I think the main thing is there's a lot of those. Gene went through a bunch of the chapters. I think the key thing is just it's meant to be choose your own adventure, right? Like that you can start with kind of unwinding the chaos of your meeting cadences or moving from functions to flow and these sorts of things. So you can start anywhere. And I think, the main thing is just at the start of the book, there are those 3 foundation models, the product operating model, outcome loop, and outcome tree. Just focus in on those, and please stay in touch on Substack, because my goal right now is to help everyone accelerate this journey. So thank you, everybody. And thank you so much, Gene.
Thanks, Mik. And by the way, I can't wait to see you share your all the learnings that will inevitably come out of this book coming out.
That's right. As we know that now the journey begins. So.
Sounds good.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, Mik.